Well, welcome. We are starting right on time so that we can finish quickly. We are recording this because we do send the video link out to everyone who registered and all clients for future. I want to welcome you to our introduction on insurance, Insurance 101. We're going to talk a little bit in the next 20 minutes or so and leaving time for Q&A about the importance of insurance. I want to introduce the team if they want to come in into the picture. Wally, Joel, and myself. There we go. There's our smiling faces. They're going to add some stories and some personal experiences about the role of insurance, which I think is critical. This is part of our 101 series, and we'll talk a little bit about what we think that is. Why are we having a seminar on insurance? Because after you crash your car, or politely after they're putting you in the ground, we can't get insurance. Insurance, I know, we love that. Wally's still laughing. He's cutting himself up over that one. It really is about having the protection in advance. And we don't want to cover you for everything. We're not looking to protect you versus meteor strikes, but we do want you to understand the role of insurance and how it can and does give you both peace of mind and protection. So let's get started. Role of insurance. It acts as a protection from the unexpected. No one can see an accident coming, an illness, or unfortunately a death. It does happen. For financial planning, it allows you to manage risk. Politely, insurance, we're giving the insurance company the risk and we're giving them a few dollars so that we're managing that risk. Then we can make smarter decisions with the rest of your dollars. Interesting, and this is important. I'm going to let Joel talk to this when it's his moment about the asset that it protects for your loved ones and the peace of mind that it can give you just having the right amount of insurance. I said we would talk about this. We truly believe that in order to create wealth for generations, we need the knowledge to move across generations. And that is ideas that can help preserve your wealth, offer support, living insurance. Those are things that can protect and create a family legacy. And insurance can be a cornerstone of these pieces. I think, though, when we talk about understanding insurance, one of the critical aspects to keep in mind is where is it, what is it used for? And we talked as a group, and Wally has, I think, quite a powerful story. So, Wally, I'm going to turn this over to you on this one.
So what I'm going to share is my own personal story about understanding insurance. Usually when we put up slides like this, it's about the client and, getting them to understand insurance. But it's interesting that when I joined the company I'm currently with almost 2 decades ago, um, I began to understand insurance sometime after. Now, usually when we sit with a client, what we do is we take a look at their financial situation, and there will be investment opportunities, things they could be doing differently, and risk management, as we'd like to call it, would be the need for insurance. At that time, it was, newbie in the industry. It was a whole lot. It was easier for me to talk a prospect or client into giving up approximately $35 a month for a critical illness insurance policy, as opposed to trying to convince them to move over a six-figure portfolio. So I did lots of that. It was necessary, it had to be done, and it was done. Then one day I get a phone call from one of these clients. His wife had just been diagnosed with cancer. I rushed down to the Tom Baker Center in Calgary. We met with her, and on his way out, swipes his card to let himself out of the parking lot, and it was declined. For the first time, I realized how much this had, I mean, the financial toll this had taken on him. I had to let him out of the parking lot. The good news is, client was okay. We ended up getting a check for 100,000 to them within the week. Came pretty quickly, and that took care of a lot of the things that they had to deal with. I'm almost sure it did with the recovery. Thinking back, this was my introduction to how important a product like this is to a financial plan. And it became something I talk about with every client. And you should talk about it too. Thank you.
Yeah, you were going to try to steal that paper. That is an incredible story. And he talks about, Wally, about what that does. When we look at why insurance matters, move my face up a little bit so you can see this. It provides a few really critical things. It provides financial protection, it provides faster recovery, it provides an incredible amount of peace of mind, and it can lead to really responsible planning. It's not just a one-time thing. And if you've had a ding, a car accident, you know that this actually can come into a fruition. I think of the client, unfortunately, it wasn't a life insurance, but it was fire. They lost their house to fire in Tuscany and it was replaced. Now, there's lots of emotional pieces. It's not just as simple as dollars replace everything, but it makes a big difference in terms of how they had felt about the entire process of going through that versus also not only losing everything, but going bankrupt at the same time. When we look at insurance and we look at the types of insurance, there's a couple of really critical types of insurance that we want to put over in play. The main one is life insurance. That's the one that I think we're almost all familiar with. Someone passes away, dollars come into pieces. Living insurance, though, is the one that actually has the most claims. In other words, as it's an industry term, just saying that those are the ones that pay the most often. That's disability insurance and critical illness. Those are two very big things, and they provide safeguards against accidents and illness. And then we have auto and home insurance. What's interesting, we kept auto and home insurance in this, even though that's not our specialty. Both of those are almost mandated. If you have a mortgage, you need home insurance. If you have an automobile in Canada, you need automobile insurance. But life insurance and disability insurance and critical illness are not mandated insurance, and yet arguably they're even more important. I'm going to have Joel talk about his own insurance journey. Joel?
Yeah, thank you, Trevor. So we were having an engaging conversation this morning, me, Trevor, and Wally, about our stories on insurance, and I thought that I'd share my own personal experience. So about 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago, I started with IG just out of college. I was about 21 years old. I'd just gotten my insurance license. I'd already had my mutual funds license and talking to lots of people about the planning and on investments, but I hadn't sold any insurance. So when I asked a colleague with IG, who also happens to be a cousin, been here for 20 years, well, I said, what am I doing wrong? And he asked me, well, do you have any insurance yourself, Joel? And my first thought was, well, I'm 20 years old. I don't own a home. I don't have a wife. I don't have a kid. Why do I need insurance? He said something very powerful. He said, how do you plan on selling something and advising on something that you don't own yourself? The next day, I went and I got myself a critical illness policy and a term insurance policy. And keep in mind, this is about 10 years ago. Now I'm a father. I own a home. I have a beautiful wife. And it just makes you realize the importance of it now. And like Trevor was saying earlier, it's something that doesn't get any cheaper as you get older, it gets more expensive. And it's provided me with a lot of peace of mind in my life. And I think it would help with many people with that.
Thank you, Joel. Shifting pieces. One of the interesting things that can come across is the history of insurance in Canada. It's been around for quite a while. So obviously, automotive insurance and other things came in with car ownership, home ownership really mostly after World War II. But life insurance has actually been around since pre-Confederation. Wow, that is interesting. And really, for the same purpose that we talk about, that's why we're so familiar with it, is it's been here for a long time. One of the most interesting things, and I'll do a little financial sector stuff, is in the world of investments. Canada's banking and financial industry is considered some of the best. We have a lot of rules around insurance companies. And sometimes people ask, well, will the insurance pay? As Wally alluded to, within the week. And that is very common because they have to follow very specific rules and regulations so that they can fund the balances for policy. So you do not have to worry about, are you going to have any issues at claim? If you have an insurance policy, it's going to happen. When I look down at the history of insurance, I'll talk about reflecting society. The critical illness came into play into the 80s, and it was a South African heart transplant doctor who realized actually, surprisingly, many of his clients were suffering heart attacks and living, or they were doing the transplant and living. But when he was doing follow-up meetings with them, he saw that financial burden that actually Wally alluded to with that own client as they were going through this incident, and realized a little bit of cash would be a huge benefit to this. The thing to keep in mind with insurance in the history of Canada, it's also in the Tax Act. When you have insurance, it generally pays out tax free. Life insurance always, critical illness, yes. Disability typically is tax free, just depending on is it you or the employer paying for it. And those are things to cover off. And the same with home and auto insurance, also pays out tax free. It is a question that we get on occasion. It's kind of neat to know. What can you do to really reduce the cost of insurance? Joel alluded to it. Get it young. That's probably one of the best things. Have a budget, and like if you were going to save $500 a month, some of that you should allocate right away to insurance and getting the right type of policy choices. And then you can look at the different types of insurance. It'll be one of our questions that we get asked a lot that I'll put in the questions and answered about, can you get some of your dollars back on an insurance policy? But the biggest thing is you need to have the insurance before you need the insurance, and is the thing. As we look at some strategies to optimize, this is a thing that we look at from a financial planning perspective. Pretty simple. Bundle it, put it together. Critical illness and life insurance can get you a little bit of a bundle discount, as can disability. Well, you can increase the deductibles. And another way to think about this is, how much self-insurance do I want? We do sometimes very small critical illness policies where people say, I'm going to put some of my own dollars aside in savings, but maybe I'll just need a $50,000 critical illness policy versus 100. And essentially what you're doing is you're self-insuring. When we talk about the type of insurance that we usually do, disability, life, and critical illness, the quotes are almost identical. We actually broker through a number of different companies. And that is important, is like if you have specific conditions, or if you're a smoker or if you're not a smoker, different companies do definitely have different rates. And that's an important. Maintain a good credit score. It doesn't necessarily apply to every insurance, but it does apply to some of the living benefits, believe it or not. They also look at your driving record on things like critical illness and disability, because they're looking at things that are like, well, that could injure them potentially. I like my piggy bank, and this is the dad when I talk about wisdom and legacy. When you look at insurance, it's a portion of a good financial plan. That's insurance 101. It's, you want to prioritize long-term security. It is a sign of responsible behavior. You know that you wouldn't drive an uninsured vehicle, for goodness sake. So it's part of that. And then you want to make sure that it has resiliency in terms of what it's building up. So we're going to leave you with a little bit of wisdom and legacy. And I'll also talk about your legacy for one type that goes with insurance often, because we're thinking about death, and that is estate planning. When I looked at estate planning, we set back for this group. This is 101. So somewhere after university and before the age of 40 typically is what we looked at it. Estate plans are wills, enduring powers of attorney, personal directives. We've done multiple seminars, webinars on those topics. I would say maybe there's a better rule of thumb in terms of when should you actually start looking at those pieces, and that's what I wanted to do for you here. So my son is 21. He doesn't have children. He hasn't told me about any of them, so I'm going to assume he doesn't have kids. He's not yet married. Don't know when that's going to happen, and he doesn't own property. So I would say he, at this point where it might be nice to have these documents, he doesn't particularly need them, and I wouldn't rush to get them done. If your family is fairly typical, that's probably good advice for you as well. As soon as you're getting married, as soon as you have children, and marriage includes common law, as soon as you have children or you buy property, that's when to get these documents done. My own, in terms of this part of the estate plan, I've only changed my will 3 times, and there's one more update to do. We had one before we had kids, one with kids, before we had grandparents. Families are complicated, so you have to make conditions for them. And then the last one will be when my son becomes the executor, which will be our next will change. So it's not a document that has to be done and reinvented and completely revisited all the time. And that's a good thing to know. If these don't yet apply to you, what you can think about with estate planning, hey, we heard from some people. I don't think there's any red flags. I think we're okay. We said we'd keep this tight, so thanks. I see there's one question there as well, and we'll answer that. But I want to talk about in closing, what's the importance of insurance? Insurance is a way to share a risk with a company for very few dollars. That is a massive advantage in terms of why you should consider doing it. When you're looking at insurance, it's part of, when we say informed decision, it's part of an overall financial plan. It's not just on its own. And I would encourage you, as we do when we talked about wealth for generations, it's not just about staying at this level of knowledge, it's about building your knowledge for the future. So, you know, when might my insurance needs and what type of insurance am I going to get that would matter? I'm going to stop sharing here and get into our questions. One of the interesting questions that we have gotten, I did see it on this one, is can I get my money back? Now, you can't for home and you can't for auto insurance, but interesting enough, for many types of both living benefits and for some types of insurance, life insurance, you can. There's return of premium options or permanent insurance. How we look at it as a team is let's get you the right type of insurance, the right coverage amount. And then if there's extra cash flow, we get the return of premium option. When I started on my own insurance journey, I didn't have extra money. So we got the simplest, most basic stuff. Though later on, I did add return of premium to a few of my living benefits. And lo and behold, after doing this for 26 years, some of those return of premiums are starting to come up over the next couple of years. And I'll both have had coverage and get a lot of my money back and all of my money back in some of the policies. So that's a good one. The other thing that was interesting to us was just a question on someone asked about insurance companies again. Yes, there have been, they have a great deal of financial scrutiny in Canada, higher than any other place that I'm aware of, at least in the world. And that means that they will, in fact, pay on their policies. So that has been terrific. Our claim history when we're settling claims has been exactly what Wally says. As soon as we get the information and we help clients get that, within weeks, we're actually delivering checks, which is awesome. As we're coming to an end, one of the most interesting things is, as the three of us have said, we're engaging in conversation. There's usually not many objections. So when people get to this place where like, I probably should get some insurance, when that's already in your headspace, you're right. You should probably go ahead and get the insurance. It does definitely make sense. If you have questions, you know how to reach out to Wally, Joel, or myself. We'd be happy to talk to you and answer it more specifically individually. But thank you very much for tuning into 101. We're right where we thought we'd be on time, under about 20 minutes. The recording will be shared with everyone shortly, and we really appreciate your time today. And hopefully, it's inspired you to go look for a little more peace of mind if it's the right time for you to look for insurance. Have an excellent day. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.